introduce yourself to others.
Okay.
Here we have people from Mexico, we have people from Sweden, and from Taiwan, and from Brazil, and the United States.
Great. Okay, I'm from the U.S. I live in Massachusetts. I'm a tech integration specialist at an elementary school, and I'm really interested in learning more about little bits and how to use microbits. Okay.
Do you know Alan? Alan Yorikins, please, Alan, introduce yourself.
Hi, Maureen. I'm Alan, and I'll introduce where I'm from. I'm actually from New Jersey, but I have that as one of my slides. I'm going to be talking about physical computing a little bit today, more about the computers than physical computing itself, which we kind of covered last week. I don't have a mention of microbits in my talk, but it's possible that some of this stuff is applicable. So I'm not positive.
Okay, and maybe you don't know, have you ever met Anders? Anders from Sweden and Veronica from Mexico. Please, Veronica, say hello.
Hello, hello everybody from Mexico. This is in the morning, and not all the Mexicans are late. We try to be on time. Thank you, Anders. Thanks for everybody.
Yes, and I'm Anders from Sweden. Always 15 minutes before time. No, I try to sometimes get over the time. I think it's good for me. But I'm an ICT advisor, pedagogy, and everything in a small town in Sweden. That's me.
And I'm going to introduce you Ishui from Taiwan. He said that he is in the library now. He is a very fan of Alan's Yorikins. And he's sorry that he has no microphone, so he can't speak, but he's here to hear. And he is very active he has groups, and he's very active in his country in everything of technology and things like that. In another opportunity, he can introduce himself. So, and there is Sandy that everybody knows, our dear Sandy. Sandy, would you like to say hello?
Well, hello, good morning, everybody. I'm just happy to be here, and I'm glad Maureen is joining us. We've been going back and forth corresponding, and Maureen, I think, would be a good person, not to put you up on the spot. She's been building a makerspace, and I'm really impressed with how she's got her funding. I'm sorry, Maureen. So that might, because I know, Heloise, you're always looking for someone to speak about stuff, and I think what she has done and how she's done it's been very creative. So that's why I invited her today, and I knew she'd be interested in hearing Alan's, and I was excited when I saw that Alan was going to speak about the microbits, so Arduino and the Raspberry Pi. So, and that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you all. And now let's start. Mr. Alan Yorikins.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen and then put the slides up. Hopefully this is going to work.
The green icon on the left?
Yeah. I just need to, yeah.
Okay.
Do you see the slides?
No.
No. Let me try again.
Oh, Maureen, I'm so excited, so happy that you joined. I didn't know that you like Microbit are doing this stuff. Oh,
Do you see it now?
yes, it's great having you with us
Yes.
again.
You do see it?
No, not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Yes, I can see it.
Yes? Oh. Okay.
You got it?
Now I can see it.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
It's okay.
So today I'm going to talk just a little bit about physical computing, just to kind of define it, just a few slides. I'm going to define what a microcontroller is, which is something you're going to normally need for physical computing. And I'm going to compare the Arduino Uno and something that I call an Arduino integrated solution. And I'll just mention this thing called the Adafruit Circuit Playground. And I'll explain why when I get there. The Raspberry Pi and a little bit about the Microbit. And in the comparison, I'm going to talk about the features of each. Something that I think is pretty important is the costs. If you're going to be outfitting a large group, costs really do matter. And some of the advantages and disadvantages, and this is totally my opinion, and you're free to disagree. Okay, so a little bit about me, where I'm from. Right now I live in New Jersey. I've lived here a good number of years. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, which is not too far from where I am now. I'm closer to Philadelphia than New York City at this point. If you need to contact me, this is my contact information. I'll leave, every slide has my email address. So if you need any of these things, and don't rush to copy any of that. All of my code is on GitHub. It's open source, and everything is there. There's nothing hidden in terms of what I'm doing. You may not understand what I'm doing, but at least the code is there. I have a little blog that occasionally I post to. I'm occasionally on Twitter, not a big user of it. And in the past, my articles on Instructables are a little old, but they're still kind of relevant. A little bit about my professional experience. I'm now retired, but I had been an embedded software engineer for close to 40 years and have a degree in that. I also did some teaching. I don't have any formal training in teaching, but I taught as what's called an adjunct professor in computer science. And I don't know if that term adjunct professor is used anywhere else. What it means, it's a fancy term. The universities here, when they need extra help, if they have a larger enrollment, will hire part-time instructors. And they don't pay very much. So what they do is they give you a fancy title. So that's why I'm adjunct professor. It means absolutely nothing. And what I taught was Java and C++. I also worked occasionally as a corporate trainer for AT&T, teaching Java and C++. After I stopped being an embedded software engineer, I was hired by my local school board to be a one-on-one special ed teaching assistant. I worked, one-on-one with a student, actually 2 students a term. The students in the school were ages 10 to 13. And while I was at the school, I'm no longer there, I started an after-school Scratch club, which was a lot of fun. I'm also currently a literacy volunteer. Literacy volunteers, I think there may be outside of the US, but in the United States, it's a national organization that tutors adults who are coming to the country and don't speak English as a first language. ESL is English as a second language, and also something that they call basic adult education. That's for people that were born here and speak English natively, but have problems with literacy, reading, writing, that kind of thing. And currently I still do a lot of coding in software, open software, and most of my stuff is in physical computing. Okay, so just to If you've used Scratch, you probably already have experienced physical computing if you're not familiar with the term. Oops. So if you've used Scratch in a classroom, you know within about 10 minutes the kids find the meow, and that's a form of physical computing. That's about the extent that Scratch provides. They don't really provide a lot. They do have things for some specific interfaces. We do. I think they may have an interface for, and I can't remember the name of the thing, where you connect. It's an Arduino-based product where you connect things like fruit and you can touch it, and it determines the touch. But they don't really support it very well. So if you want to do things with physical computing, you're going to need to probably buy a physical computer and attach some software. So what is physical computing? It's just the way to interface with the real world. Normally, you're going to need some sort of special computer, like the Arduino or Raspberry Pi. And what this is controlling are things that they call actuators, things like motors or lights or buzzers or sensors, things that read things in, things like a joystick, or you can have a temperature sensor. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of sensors and actuators you can attach. So just to give you an idea of connecting something to Scratch. Now, this is something that I wrote a while ago. It's not a very popular program, but it demonstrates physical computing. What I did was, let me expand this. What I've done is, down at the bottom of the screen, I'm using an Arduino product called an Explorer. What it has is, it's a type of Arduino. It's not standard, so I don't recommend this board at all. Plus, it's very expensive. In the US, it's about $45 US. But it has some buttons on it, some switches. It has, what my thumb is on is a little slider control. It's got a joystick. So it's kind of like a game controller. And what I did was write something where I did like a car racing program. And what you're going to see when I start this is the first thing you do is, this is the stage. So it's saying you can select the color of the car. And the way I do that, you'll see that I'm moving my thumb with the slider. It'll change color. And then I'm going to press a button and the program will start. There'll be a countdown. And once it starts, you'll see I'll be driving it with a joystick. So here I am selecting the color, and you'll see that the car color was selected. I'm going to hit the button. There's an LED on the thing that I turn yellow. Now it's going to count down. Before I start, the LED should turn green, and then I'm going to start driving with the joystick. So I'm interfacing with Scratch using that physical computer. I don't really want to go through the whole thing of this, so let's go to the next slide. And this is a little fancier thing, another example. This was developed by, I don't know if he pronounces his name Marcelo or Marcello. I don't know Portuguese very well, but he's in Portugal. He wrote an article on this. He does a lot of physical computing things. On my blog spot, there's an article about this. So let me just show you what he did. What this is he has, it's hard to see, but at the bottom of the screen, there's an Arduino that he's wired up. He has a little red LED at the bottom, which is also in Scratch. He has a representation of that. He has a sonar sensor. What this thing does is it measures distance when it sees a target. He connected this to a little motor that he now can swivel. And what he's going to do is he's going to swivel it towards this box. You'll see the distance change, and he also prints out the angle that this sensor is pointing at. When it actually encounters the box, he's going to, I think the sounds are coming from Scratch and not from my program, but it can do sounds as well. He'll change what the screen looks like. He'll light this up, and the LED itself will light up also. So let me just show you that. You can see that the sonar is turning. You hit the target, the LED lit, this changed, the sound changed, showing you the angles, the distance in centimeters. And now it's out of range again. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of what you can do with physical computing. So to do that, as I mentioned, you really need a microcontroller. And it's a special purpose computer. It has not only does it have a microcomputer on it, but it also has something called GPIO ports, general purpose input output ports. And what they do are allow you to send signals out of that microcontroller or read signals in. Input is when you're reading something from a sensor. So if you wanted to read temperature or something like that little sonar device, you would connect that as an input. Output would be, in the case of that sonar device where he was spinning it around, he's outputting to a motor. So in the microcontroller, you normally can program a given port as an input or an output. That's not always the case. Sometimes, it's always the case, but sometimes you explicitly have to do that. And the input and output pins are normally classified in two different classifications. There's a digital. Digital means that the signal only has two states. So things like turning on or off an LED or a light, or reading a button switch, which will be either on or off, or an analog type of signal, which is a continuous signal. Things like music, or maybe motor control, where you want to change the speed of the motor. Okay. By the way, you can interrupt at any time if you have questions. So the first thing I'm going to look at is an Arduino Uno.
Yes. By here, is there any question, Maureen? And Ishui, if you want to ask something, you can write and in the chat. Okay. Okay.
So if someone writes a comment, I can't see it at the moment, so if you could read it to me, that would be great. Okay. So we're talking about the Uno. The Uno is fairly inexpensive. It varies in price. If you buy the official version from Arduino, it's about $25 US. And again, in the US, you can buy clones. The Arduino is known as open source also. So anybody can build one and sell one as long as you don't use the Arduino name, which is copyrighted. So you can buy them for anywhere from $5 to $25. So the cost is pretty decent, but you need to add a bunch of stuff. You need to add a breadboard and leads and components. You can get some kits that are from $35 US and up. And there's one that I just got mail this morning. Let me see if I can get that on the screen. Yes, this is from SparkFun. It's a company in California. So they just came out with they call it an inventor's kit. So over here, you can see there's an Arduino. This is their version. It's not an official, it's a clone. They have a little baseboard. They have the breadboard and a bunch of leads and motors and wheels and buttons and all sorts of things, which is kind of nice. It is, I believe it's $100 US, but here is where some of the problems come out. So this is using their kit. They're building looks like a little wheeled robot. And you can see that it's a wiring nightmare. It's not the greatest thing if you're in a classroom full of young kids. It means that if they're going to make a mistake, and it is very easy to make a mistake, you're going to need to help them debug their wiring. So if you have older kids, who are really more into the electronics, it's fine. It's great. but it's not all that great for the younger students. It's programming, which is normally
hello. We couldn't see it.
You couldn't see that?
No, we have still the presentation. Maybe if you switch.
Try again.
Yeah, it would be nice to see it.
Oh, I know what went wrong. Okay.
Simon has just joined us. Today we have Maureen, very expertise from US. And Simon is from Tanzania. We met him on Bordeaux Scratch Conference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now? Did it appear on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is that Inventors Kit. This is their fourth version. It comes in a nice little case. It has, this is the Arduino, this red board. That's what they actually call their clone. It's a clone. They have a little base to put it on, and there's the breadboard, and here you can see they threw some LEDs. They got an LCD display. There's a whole bunch of actuators and sensors that they give you with it. But here is what I was saying about the Nightmare. So one of their by the way, it comes with a instruction book, which is available free online, and their instruction book is theirs have been excellent. There's another company in the U.S. called Adafruit that also has a similar kind of kit, and their books are not as well written. So if you want to take a look, you can go onto the SparkFun website and look for what do they call it? SparkFun Inventors Kit, and there's a link to the book. But one of the projects that they have, and the book has a bunch of projects, is you can see that there's a ton of wires for each one of these things that they're demonstrating. And getting the wiring right can be challenging, even for older students. They can, generally, if they know a little bit, they can debug on their own. But if you have younger kids, it's not a whole lot of fun trying to do that. And this kit is about $100. Let me see if there's anything else. Here they're showing their manual. So and it also shows, you can see the experiment guide online. And let me get back. Okay, hopefully you see the slides again. So the native language that you normally program the Arduino in is C++. And just another comment about the Arduino. Normally, the way that they work is you write a program that's essentially an infinite loop. You upload that to the Arduino, and the way you interact with it is through those sensors and actuators, things, like a button and a switch. Normally, you're not talking to it with your computer. In order to do that, if you wanted to be able to attach it to your computer and interact with it through a computer, other than uploading, you need additional software. One of the things that is decent about it is that there are a whole bunch of low-level block languages that are available. I'm not going to go to the link at this point, but it looks like it's not Scratch, but it's similar to what Adele showed us with the work he was doing. Things like setting up a pin as an input or an output, sending a signal out, that kind of thing. There are Scratch interfaces available. I demonstrated a couple of mine. And if you want to use the computer, there is a way to do that with other languages like Python and JavaScript, but you have to load the appropriate library onto the Arduino. So you can use it for general programming as well. This is my opinion. I think it's better for older students, mainly because of the wiring problems. And also, it's really easy to lose all those wires and parts and the rest of it. Those things happen in the classroom, regularly. It's just not a great thing. And it's a burden on the instructor, in my opinion, because you need to not only know how to debug the circuitry, but you may need to learn, if you're not using a Scratch type interface, you're going to need to learn how to code in C++. A positive is it's really robust. If you make a wiring mistake, it's really hard to burn out the Arduino. I mean, you can do it, but it takes a beating, which is kind of nice. There's another product, which is basically, it's the same thing. It's very similar to an Uno. It has the same interface, but it's what I call an integrated circuit. Let me see if I can get that up on the screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what's known as this is from Adafruit. It's another form of an Arduino, but it has actuators and sensors integrated on the board. You can see the size down here. It's fairly, this is somebody's hand, so it's fairly small. It's got a couple of buttons. It has these LEDs, which are red, green, blue LEDs that you can control. It's got, as I said, buttons. I'm not sure what else it has. Let's see. 10 LEDs. It has a motion sensor, which is an accelerometer, a temperature sensor, a light sensor, a sound sensor, a mini speaker, two push buttons and a slide switch. Has an infrared receiver and transmitter. One of the things that it has, which is nice, these little holes allow you to connect. If you wanted to connect things to the outside world, if you wanted to have your own LEDs, you can use alligator clips. Microbit has something similar, which makes it kind of easier. You don't have to have those really fine wires. But in general, for the classroom, everything that you're probably going to need is built on to the board, so there's nothing to lose. Let me get back to the slides. This particular board, they have an interface into something called Microsoft MakeCode, which is a JavaScript block language. Microbit is using this also if you're using that interface. They also have a Python interface called MicroPython. Because it's an Arduino, you can program it directly in C++. I haven't done any Scratch interface for this board in particular, but I think my two programs would work. And there are others out there too that may work as well, but I'm not really sure. I'm saying it's best for older students. If it works with my interfaces or another Scratch interface, it would be fine for younger kids. If not, it's best for the older students, again, because you're programming on a higher level language. Another advantage is, as an instructor, you don't have to deal with wiring and debugging it. You just need to understand the programming. And again, no parts to lose. Next is the Raspberry Pi. It's fairly expensive compared to the others. It's $35, which it still takes, that alone won't get you very far. You need to add a micro SD card, which the operating system and where you program needs to be added. That's about another $10 US. And if you're connecting any kind of actuator, you're probably going to need an external power supply, which is about $10. The reason for that is that normally these things plug into your USB port on a computer. USB port does not supply very much current. So if you start adding things that draw a lot of current, on a Raspberry Pi, it'll shut down. So you probably need that. So we're up to about $45. A real advantage is that it's a real computer. It runs Linux. So you have the full advantages of a computer. It has a built-in HDMI video. It's got sound, a bunch of USB. Let me see if I can bring up that on the screen. And another advantage is that.
Excuse me, Alan.
Yeah.
Excuse me, my ignorance. But when you say that camera is available, what do you mean? In the board, or what? What is it?
Let me bring up that the camera is available as a separate piece. So if I go to, let me see, this is the Raspberry Pi homepage. And I don't know if they have it. Yeah, okay. So there's a camera. These are very small. It's about one, I would say about 3 centimeters square. It plugs into, there's a little connector on the board and it plugs into there. And it's fairly cheap. Again, this all adds up. I mean, if you're going to have a classroom full of this stuff fully outfitted, it gets very expensive. They're about $20 US. They have the same problem. Raspberry Pis have, let me see if I can get the picture up. They have these pins where you connect all those wires to. And you get into that same rat's nest of wires, which is a problem. But one of the things they do have is a thing that they call a hat. It's a plug-on board that has a bunch of, these are LEDs. You can see a little picture here. It makes it an integrated solution. But again, this is kind of pricey. It's about, this board alone would be an additional $40 to the Raspberry Pi. One of the great advantages of them is that they have some excellent educational resources. They also have, they do training. They have, you can become a certified Raspberry Pi instructor, and they have that, I think, once a year. They've had that in the States, I think, for the first time this year. I don't think it's online, but I could be wrong. I haven't participated in that. But they have a bunch here. They have a bunch of lesson plans, and it's pretty neat. If I go back to here, let me share my slides again. Tell you, Google is kind of annoying with this. I wish I could just, whatever's on the screen shows, but it doesn't seem to work. Okay. Again, it doesn't come with any actuators or sensors in terms of languages that it supports. Since it's running Linux, it supports almost any language you can think of. But it is more delicate than an Arduino. So that board that I showed you, that Arrow board, is called a PiSense. If you're using discrete components, it's easier to burn something out on the Raspberry Pi. So it's a little more delicate. And again, I would say it's geared more for older students. There are Scratch interfaces available. I have a tutorial on how to build your own Scratch interface, but Simon Walters in England has a whole bunch of things that interface with the Raspberry Pi with Scratch, and his programs are pretty popular. And the last is the microbit. So this is probably, in my opinion, the best choice, with one caveat, and I'll mention what that is in a second. The cost is about $10. You can program it in JavaScript, either using the Microsoft JavaScript blocks or directly in JavaScript. And the editor that Microsoft provides, or at least Microbit provides, can switch between the two. You can do it in Python. And this is the caveat. I'm working on an interface for Scratch. I have something kind of working, but I'm having some issues with it. And hopefully within about 2 weeks, I'll have a full Scratch interface to the microbit. The advantage is that it's integrated. It has a bunch of sensors and actuators. It seems to be really robust. Since everything is there, you're likely not to connect external components, although you can. So you're not likely to burn anything out. Again, it's good for both older and younger students, assuming, again, if you're going to use Scratch, that I get this working. And they have a bunch of free teaching resources as well. So we can just take a quick look at what that looks like. Oops. I was going to show something else. So this is the Microbit website, and they have a whole bunch of teaching resources. One of the things that I also wanted to show you that a while back, I took an Arduino-based product from SparkFun, and this is called a Redbot robot. And this red board here is a form of an Arduino, and you can control this thing through your computer, and it's kind of a neat, it's about $100. It's kind of neat. But what I wanted to do was to convert it to Raspberry Pi, which I did do. But again, you're going to see something that's not too pretty. You can see it became a wiring harness nightmare. What was very nice and neat, the Raspberry Pi is down here, and this is all the add-on stuff that I had to add on and all the wiring I did. So again, doing anything, when you start building things, wiring can become a problem. And just wanted to make one mention. These things, you know, if you're going to buy a classroom full of these, even the Microbit can become, you know, expensive for school budget. So one of the things that you can do, and actually may be kind of interesting, is don't buy for each student, but buy like for 2 students or 1 for every 4, and then come up with team projects, which has an advantage in itself. Having the kids work in a team and cooperating can be very useful as well. So hopefully the prices won't scare you too much. But I know, at least in the school I was in, they couldn't afford even the Microbit for a classroom, or you know, a quarter of a classroom. It's really sad. I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. I'm guessing it's the same thing, that money is kind of hard to come up with. So that's really my presentation. If you have any questions, let me back here.
Wonderful. You made me want to learn more about this and try to start playing with these boards too.
Okay, am I back on? Is my screen still being shared?
No, you're back.
Okay. So if you have any questions, I can show you, Maureen, if you're interested to see what the Scratch blocks are going to look like. I can do that also. Let me see if I can get that quickly. Go here. Taking a while to get there. Please. Okay. Let me share this. Oops. Yeah, this is the blocks that I've added. I don't know if it may be a little hard to see, but I have a block that will display different can patterns onto the LED matrix that's on it. They have a little 5x5 LED matrix that you can put You can light each one individually, or you can put, here's a happy face. I have a drop-down list here that has a whole bunch of canned things. There are arrows and a clock with the hands on a clock. There is sad, angry, that kind of thing. You can scroll on that LED display. You type text in here and it'll scroll at once. You can individually control each one of the pixels on that 5x5 display. Pick X and Y and then how bright it is. And you can clear the display. You can monitor to see if either of the buttons that are on that microbit are pressed. They have 3 pins on it, so that if you touch any one of those pins to ground, this will come up as true. So there's 3 pins, 0, 1, and 2. They have an accelerometer, so I can determine if the board is being tilted right, left, up, or down, or if it's being shaken. And I'm adding 2 more monitoring blocks, where it's going to allow you to actually see the values of these pins, both analog and digital, and also that you'll be able to write analog. There's another 2 blocks, control blocks, that allow you to write analog and digital values to those pins as well. So this is an early version. This is kind of working. One of the problems with it, it's specific to Python 3. It has some other issues, and so I'm developing another version now. This thing is never going to, the one that I'm showing is not going to be official. The official one will be Python 2 and 3 compatible, which makes life easier for instructors. If you have one version loaded in your school, then you don't have to go crazy and having multiple versions. With Windows, having multiple versions of Python is really a problem. Okay.
Alan, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm confused with those. You're showing those blocks. How do you get those blocks? I mean, do they have to be downloaded and used offline, or is there a way to use it within Scratch, or is it Scratch X, but then you can't share anything?
Okay, so it's a mess. What my programs all work with the offline editor. At one time, Scratch has been really extremely uncooperative when it comes to these extensions. They define how they work. So they have a specification, and if anybody wants it, I can point you to it, that describes how you would build those custom blocks. When Scratch 2.0 first came out, they, online and offline, the interface that I'm using, which is an HTTP interface, worked with both. And you were able to share projects. They no longer allow you to do that online with the HTTP interface. So the only thing that you, and if you go offline, create a project, and then I think you can, no, you can't, I don't even think you can open it with the online version. I think it's only offline now. They have another version of the Scratch editor called Scratch X, which I wrote a couple of programs for it. They're like controlling that little robot, the SparkFun robot. The problem with that is that it's another mess. In order to get something published, you have to get their approval. And they don't respond to approval requests very quickly. They're kind of weird. I don't know what their problem is. I mean, it's such a great program. I had a lot of problems getting them to fix bugs. And early on, they just kind of told me I was nuts. They're not bugs. And they didn't believe me till one of their sponsors complained as well. And the only way I can get things moving was to complain to Mitch Resnick, which is not something I particularly want to do. I mean, he's got enough on his plate. We just have to go run interference for me. And the other problem is the HTTP interface. They will not say that they're committed to that at any point. They can pull that at any point. What's going to happen with Scratch 3.0? I haven't heard anything about what they're talking about for what they're going to do for extensions. So it's unclear. It's really a shame. There's another program that's similar to Scratch called Snap, It comes out of Berkeley. It's much easier. That works both. It works through the browser, and that works online and offline. I have some of my interfaces have Snap interfaces. They don't have things like all of the sprites that Scratch has or backgrounds. So it's more sophisticated in terms of its programming capabilities. But it's not it's really for kids. It's not a lot of fun to use, but it's very easy to build an interface. The original name for Snap was Build Your Own Blocks. It was called BYOB, which here has another meaning, which means bring your own bottle, which means bring liquor or wine to a restaurant normally. And so they got complaints at Berkeley, and they changed the name to Snap. But the interface is, again, it's a mess. It's a shame. And I understand why they're protective over the online version. There was a point in time where they had the shared variables. I don't know if you're familiar with that in Scratch. Or cloud variables, I'm sorry, cloud variables. They had taken that offline for a while because some kids figured out a way to put up a chat room using it. And they obviously want to protect the kids. So that's the reason that they make things so difficult with the online. That I understand that. And they don't want to have to go and qualify these programs to see if they can cause mischief or not. But again, it's not very well supported, and I don't really understand why. Did I answer your question?
I think so. I mean, so it's offline. So we would download it, right? And then use it on the offline version.
Yeah. And
yeah.
A lot of two of my programs, my program called S2AFM has been translated by users to, I don't know, something like 12 languages. And most of those folks tell me they prefer the offline because internet connections for them are spotty. And I even found when I was running my club, if something was going on in a school and there was a ton of traffic, we would start losing connections to Scratch, or it would slow down to be unusable. So I'm not suggesting that it's a better solution. If you have great connectivity, it isn't. But Scratch does not make things very friendly for any of these extensions. I know the ones on Raspberry Pi, there were a bunch for the old version of Scratch that came with Raspberry Pi, the version 1.3, I think it was, of Scratch. So it's a mess. I mean, and they've changed their interfaces over time. This is like their fourth specification of how to build an interface. And one year they changed it twice in a year. So again, they're just not very friendly.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it.
I think that there's international pressure over the Scratch team. Since we saw in 2016 the Scratch conference, we were in a private session, and a lot of people was asking for these extensions and open for that. And in this conference in Brazil, in Bordeaux, all the community, the most of the questions are, oh, when you're going to open for this extension or this extension. And for the next version, 3.0, they are promising a lot of extensions. Said that they are in together and they are going to like this about not, but they are going to do that. Maybe for controlling. But I have seen in this last conference a lot of people asking for the same thing.
One of the problems that they have also, I mean, even if you figure out their specification, the thing that I had mentioned to them was that they really need to come up with a way for kids to create their own blocks. It's complicated. So, and Scratch is not very friendly, so that if you come up with the code that creates the blocks, and I don't know if you guys are familiar, there's something called JSON. It's like XML. It's name value pairs, essentially. You describe things by having a name of something and you give its value. If you miss a single comma in this thing, it's any syntax errors. When you go to load the extension, nothing loads, there's no errors. It's totally unfriendly. I always felt I would prefer that the kids create their own extensions because then they can make up whatever they want. They kind of have that with the Moore blocks, but it's limited. Also, Scratch has been horrible in supporting things like Linux. They now, and I don't think you can even run Scratch offline on Linux anymore. I have an older version which I can, but only the older versions of Linux run it. They had, for Scratch Online, for the ScratchX stuff, they had a plugin for the Chrome browser that was supposed to work, and people complained bitterly that it didn't work for Mac or Windows. On occasion, it would work, sometimes and not. They had nothing for Linux. They claimed that they were going to get it and never did. ScratchX has a microbit extension. It looks a little bit like mine. It only works on a Mac. So again, I think, and now I don't know what they're going to do now that Google isn't involved with 3.0. I'm hoping that they make it easier to deal with. Although it's coming from, Google did Google Blocks, which is where I think the Scratch interface is coming, the new Scratch interface is coming from. Developing with that on your own also, it's not easy. It's a lot of JavaScript. It's not all that simple to do, and it's kind of a pain. So I don't know where they're going with this. I don't have I hate to be negative, but I don't have a lot of hope in terms of making it easy for people to do things. I hope they do. I hope Google actually, does that and makes it, kind of a block language to create your block language, but I don't know. We'll wait and see. And the fact that Google is doing it is probably good, because Scratch, the people up at MIT have done some very strange things. For 2.0, they went to this, instead of using HTML5, they went to Flash, which is a mess, which means you can't run Scratch 2.0 on your iPad. They claim that HTML5 was not far enough along, yet Snap, which came out before Scratch 2.0, was using HTML5. So they're very fixed in their ways. They're very bright people, but I just wonder where they're coming from sometimes. And my guess is it's a bunch of grad students. They use what they know well, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they're not always.
This is another thing they announced, that they are not going to work on Flash. I don't know how to say works on Flash anymore. They're going to allow to work in another platform language. I don't know how to say that. So they are not going to use Flash anymore, and because there's a lot of pressure for using Scratch in iPads, tablets, and iPhones and things like that. So they are promising all of these for the next version. I don't know, because I see a lot of the whole world asking for so many things. I don't know how can they deal with all these demands. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully, Scratch is being worked on. Scratch 3.0, I think, is being developed by Google, or at least in conjunction with Google. So it's going to be some form of JavaScript with HTML5, which is what Snap uses. And that is portable. I know Snap has a problem on, it works with the iPad, but it doesn't work on Android devices too well. I don't know if they fixed that. They've come out with a new version, but hopefully they're going to make this a lot friendlier. Yeah, Flash is being dropped by everybody, so that Scratch has to do that. I mean, they also used the language, which was based on Smalltalk, it's a nice language, but nobody's using it. So it was an academic exercise, which was fine, but it's just not great for extending.
Okay. Now it's about you experts in technology to make questions, suggestions. Maureen, Anders, Simon.
Yeah, I think I can. This presentation has been really nice. And actually right now I'm just holding one of the microbits that I got from Bodu. And it's been interesting trying to play with it and do activities that I think I could do with children here. And also and one of the biggest challenges we've been discussing the past.
Please speak slower because the connection is not so good. It's cutting. Could you repeat, please?
Yeah. So I was saying that apart from just playing with the microbit here on my own, I've also been in the LCO course, and one of the things we're discussing is how to unplug, because like I think I have only one in my classroom, and I'm thinking, how do I make sure that I can teach all the kids in the class with just one of these? And so any ideas on what you've been doing, but also something that I can do to teach with one microbit or even very few will be helpful.
I know that one of the editors that come from microbit has a simulator. So if you're using, I think that's for the JavaScript block language. So if you run a program, it will simulate it. If you want to use Python, I don't know if there is one for Python, but you may be
I haven't seen any.
Have the kids actually program, run it on that simulator, and then you can have them actually then run, flash the microbit, and they can actually see it run on the actual device.
Hello, Alan. Can I say something? Well, I'm Veronica. I'm a kindergarten teacher. We usually use Makey with the Scratch at the beginning because it's easy for children and for teachers of these children. And now I bought yesterday a lot of things with Arduinos and things to make robots. Because we use this kind of things to make little robots with them. At first, we start with this kind of this. I don't know the name in English, but we use little motors to put it here and to make children to move with the air, eolic robots, and then start then with them thinking how we can use this kind of things. At first, using all of these and moving and putting them challenge about, you think this is going to be better, it's going to run fast, or this, if you use that, it's going to be fast. And put challenge to them if 3 is better than 4 or something like that. But now we are using Arduinos to make difference. But I I don't know about the microbits. It's good for children or the teachers of these children at school, because if I want to have all of these for 10 of those are about 6,000 pesos. Which is better for us to buy if we need to buy something? Which is the best thing? How is the best for us at school?
It really kind of depends, I think. I don't have a lot of experience adding external circuitry to the microbit, so I don't really I can't advise you there. It looks like it shouldn't be too hard, but I don't know. The Arduinos are very flexible in that they have lots of these I/O pins. So if you're comfortable with that, I don't know if you're buying the official Arduino, from Arduino. They're very expensive, but I know here in the States, there's a company called Micro Center. It's an electronics store. They have a clone which they normally sell for $10, but you can get it on sale sometimes for $5, and it works perfectly fine. So if you don't feel uncomfortable having to do the wiring to the motors and writing that program, the Arduino, if that's what you're using, may be perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that the wiring and debugging of that, if the kids are doing it, is annoying. If you're wiring it up for them, then they don't have an issue with that. And just to let you know, you can I don't know if you know what kind of motor driver you're using for the motor, but it's possible that you might be able to actually control your robot with Scratch. You have your microphone is muted, Veronica.
Okay, I bought it yesterday because we want to have a workshop soon, and I bought this little one for the Eolic, this little one, and this.
The only thing is you can't wire the motor directly to the Arduino. You need to have an extra piece called a motor driver. And the motor driver is what gets connected to the Arduino, and the driver is between the Arduino and the motor.
I think it's going to make this okay, because we have a friend of us who uses at school, and yesterday we went there to have, but we didn't have a lot of money. That's why we need to have things for maybe 10 kids who's going to be on a team with others, and then we can use this for more. But I never use the microbits. That's why I'm thinking if it's better or not. We are going to try with the Arduinos, and I think it's going to be okay, because we use this like a robot model, but we start with little things, because for us, the process of thinking is the best, not the things. What are you going to do with the process of thinking? And this is the way.
I believe there is a small robot that is built specifically for the microbit. I don't know how much that cost. If you need a link, I can look it up. Again, cost, whether that does everything you want to do for your lesson plans, I don't know. And whether the cost is good compared to what you're doing. But yeah, cost is a major problem.
Yeah, but this course and this conference, it was so fine for us. I'm going to share with my other peers. Thank you very much, Alan.
You're very welcome.
Okay, we are about finishing our session today. I'd like to know if someone else would like to make some questions, suggestions, ideas. Of course, we can go on discussing and always exchange ideas. Maureen, would you like to talk something? Anders?
Yeah. Am I unmuted now? I can't tell.
Yeah, you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious about what Anders was holding up, whether he had that robot that you were talking about or not. And I'm really bad at all of the Raspberry Pi and Arduino things. I can't see those little holes in the breadboard for the life of me. I spend more time debugging than doing. So I tend to go with things that I can actually see. The Hummingbird stuff I can actually see because it's color-coded, and that kind of helps me. But I want the kids, just because I can't see it, I still want to have things that my kids can use. So I'm looking for things that I don't have to debug because I can't see them, that the kids can use. So that's what I'm looking for.
Yes, I could probably show this one. It's for the microbit. It's there are two motors. It's servo motors, so you don't need too much current for driving them. But I think it's not really good because you have to assemble it yourself, and it's too many pieces and the very small pieces too. So I gave up a little bit, but I'm trying to do it again. But I'm using the microbit with the motor shield, and I think the motor shield is very good because you can screw what do you call it? You have the screwdriver into the cable into a hole and screwdriver, and then it's okay. So I'm trying that into my classes now, and I think it's very good. And you can use the radio connection between two microbits, and you can steer the other one with just gestures. So I think I really like the microbit, really. And you can use, as Alan said, we can use the block programming, JavaScript or MicroPython if you like. So I think that's a good idea. I've tried Arduino in class too, but I have so little time to learn how to code. So they just write the code that I provided them. So I don't think it's a good idea. I think the microbit it's a little bit better. I don't know.
I think you could show some of the projects you are developing with the kids, Anders. The practical things, and maybe Simon and others that are using microbits as well, or exchange ideas. What do you think?
Yes, this week I started a new class. So next week they are going to get into programming a project, and I have some robots, and they can do their own project. Last class, some of the girls made a unicorn with flashing eyes, and I think it was wings like this one. I used a servo motor for that.
Oh.
So
You could show us
yes,
next week.
Yes, I could take photos and some maybe some video shots too.
Yes, it would be great. Ideas for the others that are starting working with microbit too.
Yeah, I could do, but not a talk like Alan, but maybe I can show you something.
We are a creative group, and we are not a school. We don't have, you know, each one in your own pace, own personality, own strategy, whatever. It's the richest are in this mix and exchange ideas and learnings and knowledge. That's the coolest thing.
Yes, and I'm very interested in Maureen's. You said something about makerspace. I'm in this phase now. I'm trying to get a makerspace into our small little town. So this is my first step. So
yes, for sure, Maureen could present something for us too next session. Oh, next session. We can schedule. We are anxious to learn from you.
Yes.
Anders, in Mexico, we have Hacedores, is the translation of makerspace. Hacedores.com are the makerspace in Mexico. His director is Antonio Quirarte, and he is so close to us. He is trying to expand all his knowledge about makerspaces. If you want to talk with him, he's a very nice person, and he's making with only a few little space he has in the center of the city. And I think it's not only what can you do in a little space, what can you do out of that little space with the other peoples, and what is that is the meaning of Hacedores with Antonio Quirarte. And
you could invite him to present something for us.
Yes, I'm going to tell him.
Yes, it would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So next week we have Anders, and in 15 days we have Maureen's, and in the third week we have Antonio Quirarte from Mexico presentation. Okay?
Okay.
Wait a second. I just I just share some of the project. I couldn't make a presentation for an hour. Maybe it takes 15 minutes. I don't know.
That's okay. We just want to see, to learn it, and to make questions. That's okay.
For me, it would be great if we could share a little bit about the makerspaces in the same, because I'm in the right time for this.
Yes. Okay,
I'm just starting to do.
Okay, you have a lot of material. Start to put it together. Okay, people, thank you so much. Thank you, Alan, for your presentation. We're learning a lot and sharing with the people around the world. Thank you, Maureen, for coming to our group and joining us today. It's a pleasure. Maureen is an old friend too from the early times. And so thank you very much. See you next week with Anders' big presentation. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Bye,
bye Veronica. Bye, Sandy, Maureen, Simon.
See you.
Bye, Anders. Bye.